We emerged back in Earth's system, just as Steve thought we would. That was good. We did not emerge at the exact same point from which we departed, in the void between Jupiter and Saturn. That was less good. Instead, we emerged between Earth and the Moon. Quick astronomy lesson. There's a lot less distance between the Earth and the Moon than there is between Jupiter and Saturn. That means the gravitational pull of the larger body, in this case my home planet, was going to become a factor, especially since the crew piloting our ship had anticipated popping into gravity negligible's emptiness, and not next to something as big as a planet. And while we're at it, quick lesson in space battle tactics. When you suddenly appear near a planet where there are dozens of enemy ships on the lookout for anything that doesn't belong, you don't have a whole lot of time to come up with a clever plan that doesn't end with capture or destruction. Steve did not discuss options, because there were no options to discuss. We had nowhere to run, and there was no place to head but down. In order to avoid being spotted by the orbiting Fatic cruiser, he took us directly towards Earth. The ship rumbled and lurched as we entered the atmosphere, but quickly settled. The view screens revealed clouds, and below us, oceans. Inhabited planets tended to look similar from orbit, but there was still something unmistakable about my own world. Even viewed from miles up, this was where I came from, the place I was fighting for, and it had been invaded by aliens who hated me. Head for someplace uninhabited, I told Steve. We can't let the non-humans be spotted. No! Dr. Rube cried. He was rubbing his knobby horns, which tended to mean he was nervous. The Fads won't miss an unidentified spacecraft entering the atmosphere. You have to find someplace densely populated where the natives of this planet can blend in. Those of us from other worlds are going to be captured. There is no avoiding that. I glanced at Tamrat. Forget that. We need another option. It's the only way, he said. He had opened up the holographic keyboard on his data bracelet and was typing rapidly while he talked to us. I'm sending all of you my plan. The Fads always follow protocol, which is to wait 2 standard days before they interrogate prisoners. With your upgraded skill tree, that should give you ample time to find and liberate us. If we attempted anything else, we'd all be captured, and the situation would be much more difficult. We want to get off-world unhurt, but we also want to do it without revealing what we can do now. So I suggest you only use the former military technology as concealment, nothing ostentatious. The less they know about our new abilities, the better. A message pinged in my HUD, and I opened it, and glanced quickly at Dr. Rupe's plan, which didn't seem to make sense. I looked at Steve and Tamrat, who both nodded. If they were on board, I had no chance but to go along with the scheme, however much I hated it. I can't agree to this, Volonic said. He was the only one among us who had not received the former implants. He didn't even have a data bracelet, so Dr. Rupe couldn't have shown him the plan. On behalf of Tamrat and myself, I insist that we find an alternative that does not involve capture. We, as had become our custom, we ignored him. We are also going to have to destroy this ship, Charles said. It is of former origin, which means they'll be able to figure out exactly who we are. Yes, Dr. Rupe agreed. He had already thought of it, and began programming a molecular decomposition program into the ship's computer. It was a lot less spectacular than an explosion, but a great deal more effective. The ship would dissolve into particles and drift away in the breeze. There would be no pieces left to examine or reconstruct. The Fads would know some aliens had landed on the planet, but it would take them time to identify their species and point of origin. If Dr. Rupe's information was correct, Fatic protocol would require the prisoners to stew for 2 days before they began any questioning. With the aid of the stealth features on our upgrades, we'd use that time to find our friends, steal a ship, and be back to exactly where we were before we started spiraling out of control through Earth's atmosphere. Your world, Steve said to me. You should take the helm. I sat down and began steadying the ship as I figured out where I should go. If Alice, Charles, Misun, and I were all going to blend in, we needed to be someplace that was ethnically diverse, so none of us looked out of place. We were also wearing Confederation clothing, which wasn't that different from plenty of Earth clothing, but it would help to be in a place with lots of weirdly dressed teenagers. Maybe there was a better spot on the planet than New York City for kids who looked like they'd gotten their outfits from space, but I couldn't think of any. While I piloted the ship, Dr. Rupe turned to address the humans. We can't even guess at all the abilities we now possess.
But finding us and rescuing us from the Fads is well within your power. I have no doubt you can do this. But you are going to need to protect yourselves from scrutiny. You have a camouflage ability, so use it to hide your data bracelet and any technology that could identify you as having spent time off-world.
I checked my HUD and saw this was pretty easy to do.
Why do we need to wait to be rescued?
Thelonic asked.
Why can't you use your new abilities to lead us to safety?
Because once the Fads understand what we can do, they're going to take us much more seriously,
Temrat said.
If they realize we're basically walking weapons with the means and will to take down their empire, they'll find ways to make our lives more difficult.
Exactly,
Dr. Roop said.
However, those of you who are from this world will have one disadvantage, and that is the people you know and care about. If the Fads identify you, they may try to use your families and friends against you. For that reason, I suggest you do all you can to conceal your identities and to avoid making contact with anyone.
This was a disappointment. Alice had wanted to check in on her dad, and I had been hoping to talk to my parents to make sure they were okay. We all wanted to know that our friends and families were safe, but we couldn't take the risk. The best way to protect them was to stick to the plan and get the Fads off Earth for good. Okay, I said. I think we get it. We were coming across the Atlantic and could see Manhattan now. My first impulse was to land in Central Park, and our course was projected on a holographic display above the helm station. When Temrat saw where I was headed, she shoved me out of the console.
An open field is going to make it impossible for you guys to escape. You need someplace crowded where you can vanish quickly.
Temrat may not have known very much about New York, but by pure chance, or clever instinct, she picked a good spot, landing our ship in Astor Place, right by a big statue of a cube. I didn't know what the cube was supposed to be, but I was pretty sure no one was looking at it too closely when our ship touched down. On our view screens, we could see people staring at us, but keeping their distance, not sure what fresh horrors were going to emerge. They probably thought we were more Fads come to do something terrible. Everyone ready? I asked.
Not yet,
Dr. Roop said.
We have a few minutes before the Fads will likely be able to mobilize a response to an unknown spaceship landing here. Keep in mind that on occupied worlds, the Fads use a system of passive security checks embedded into virtually all the technology. Inhabitants radiate an identification aura, which is constantly being verified. You will have to forge identification auras in order to blend in. And this should be quite easy to do with your new upgrades, but you will first have to hack into the local security system. That means you will not have the opportunity to generate proper identification until you are actually interacting with local authorities. Meanwhile, they will be attempting to read your aura before it exists.
Okay, so I'd be forging a new identity on the fly under impossible conditions. Got it, I said.
Then I will open the hatch,
said Dr. Roop.
Is everyone prepared to run?
Not yet,
Temrat said. She threw her arms around me and hugged me.
Don't be long,
she whispered in my ear. I won't, I told her. The last time we'd been separated, I'd promised to come and get her, but I'd had no idea how I could make it happen. This time around, I was ready. The Fads were not going to get in my way. Dr. Roop opened the hatch, and the gloomy light of an overcast day streamed in. We ran. By unspoken agreement, the humans all stuck together, as did the aliens. It wasn't going to work in anyone's favor if we got separated. I'd been to New York a few times with my mom, and I felt like I knew the city moderately well. I understood the difference between uptown and downtown, and could read the subway map, but I'd never been to New York during an alien occupation, and that changed things. The streets were, as always, full of people, and I was pleased that none were Fads. I had no doubt there were plenty of them on the planet, but none of them were near me, and that was a good thing. Less good was the obvious influence they'd had on the place. In the short time they'd been on Earth, all the billboards and advertisements on buildings were now about the glories of the Fadic Empire. There were holographic projections in the skies promising peace, prosperity, and order. More than that, I saw human police officers in altered uniforms changed so that they reflected the cut of Fadic military uniforms. On one of the police cars rushing towards where we'd landed, I saw the motto, "To pacify and preserve order." Worst of all, were the billboards and posters showing the smug face of our supreme viceroy, Nora Price. I was annoyed, but not all that surprised, that she had risen to become top phatic bootlicker on Earth. She had been the adult human representative during our first visit to Confederation Central, but it had turned out she was a phatic double agent. Now she'd received her reward for selling us out. Pictures of her were everywhere. We saw her glancing down at us wherever we went, smiling her humorless smile, as text accompanying the images urged us to admire and obey, or submit to your viceroy and prosper. Nora Price and I had a history, and it wasn't a pleasant one. I'd made her look bad in front of her phatic masters, and I knew she would like nothing better than to see me face what she considered justice for my crimes of not wanting to be murdered. I needed to rescue my friends and get busy putting an end to this invasion before she found out I was here. I dared a quick glance behind me while police officers rushed out of their vehicles to inspect our ship. They seemed afraid to get too close, a decision they probably felt good about when the ship began to glow an eerie white color, and then slowly dissolved into wispy fog that blew away in the breeze. I started to run again, but Alice grabbed a hold of my arm.
Don't,
she said.
No one else is running. Act normal.
She means act like a normal person,
Misum elaborated.
Don't act normal for you.
Alice was right. A crowd had now formed at what had been mutually determined a safe perimeter around where the ship had landed. The police were cautiously walking around the now empty spot, but there were no signs of anything that had been there a second ago. Several of them were talking nervously on their phones, obviously unclear about how to proceed. My guess was that the Fads weren't particularly forgiving planetary masters, and none of these officers wanted to do the wrong thing in a completely unfamiliar situation. As far as any of them could know, they'd already made 1,000 mistakes, and their new bosses were going to be very angry. As for Tamret, Steve, Dr. Roop, and Volonic, I could see no sign of them. Maybe they hadn't been captured yet, but it was only a matter of time. 2 cat aliens, a lizard man, and a guy with a giraffe neck were not going to blend in, not even in New York City. I glanced back over my shoulder and saw police officers moving crowds away from where the ship had been, and they weren't being too gentle about it.
I can't believe they're working with the Fads, I said.
New York cops should be leading the charge against the aliens.
I did some research on the way over here,
Alice said.
And I figured it was pretty good to be prepared.
Especially, I thought, since she plans on staying.
About 10% of the population on Earth now has behavior modification nanites,
she explained.
Anyone in law enforcement or the military, or with any kind of leadership role has them. It's not exactly mind control, but they make people want to help the Fads. It's not really their fault that they're cooperating.
So, we can't expect any local help, I said. Good to know. Alice looked around.
Yeah, so, now what?
Now, we wait until they're captured, I said. Then we find out where they're being held and go get them. Let's give things a few hours to settle down and then see if we can hack into the phatic planetary computers.
Okay,
Alice said.
I'll help you make sure everyone gets away, but then you guys are on your own.
What? Mi-sun crinkled her face in surprise. That was the first she'd heard of Alice's plan to leave.
I'm just...
Alice said, cutting herself off. I guess maybe she didn't want to talk about her dad's problems.
This is just more than I signed on for, you know? And I'm worried about my dad.
Yeah, Mi-sun said. She seemed to be thinking about this. I'm worried about my family, too. We began to turn away from the crowd when we noticed a police officer standing directly behind us. He was holding up his smartphone and moving it like he was scanning us, like taking videos. Why don't you have local citizen identification auras? He demanded. I haven't had the chance to forge mine yet was not an answer that was going to get me very far. We forgot them at home? I attempted. I took some comfort in the knowledge that there was no response unstupid enough to get us out of the situation. By now, several other officers were coming towards us, getting out their handcuffs. We could either fight and run, which would only draw attention to us, or go along for now. Looks like we've got 4 more delinquents for re-education school, one of the cops said as he cuffed my hands behind my back.
Don't worry. Pretty soon you'll learn all about the Phatic Empire. I know things must seem scary right now, but the behavioral modification nanites they've given me have helped me see that fads are really our friends.
And that's how we ended up going back to school.